3 weeks before my wedding, I turned my car around, just to grab my military ID. If that card had been sitting in my wallet that morning, I probably would have married a con artist, and chances are, I would have lost everything I'd spent the last 12 years building. My name is Heather Morgan. I'm 35 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. For the past 12 years, I've worked in internal financial fraud investigations. My job was never to catch people lying, it was to find the exact moment when their story stopped matching the evidence. After enough years, that kind of thinking stops being a skill, it becomes instinct, the same instinct that saved my life. On one ordinary morning, Daniel Carter had no idea what I actually did. All he knew was that I was an Army officer. Sometimes I traveled, sometimes I had to take phone calls. That couldn't happen in front of other people. Whenever he asked, I'd just smile. It's mostly administrative work. I never imagined that keeping my real job to myself would become the first thing that protected me from everything he had planned. Daniel was the kind of man everyone trusted almost instantly. Polite, calm, the type who always seemed to know exactly what to say, to make people feel seen. My friends kept telling me I'd found one of the good ones, and for a long time, I believed them. The church was booked, the invitations had already gone out, our honeymoon was planned. My mother had hung my wedding dress in the guest room weeks earlier. Every time she walked past it, she smiled. That morning, I stopped at a red light and reached for my wallet. Then I froze. My military ID wasn't there. I remembered exactly where I'd left it. On the kitchen counter, right beside my keys. I sighed, turned on my signal, and made a U-turn. It took less than 10 seconds to make that decision. What I didn't know then was that sometimes the smallest choices rewrite the rest of your life. I pulled into the driveway. Everything looked perfectly normal. Birds singing in the trees. A light breeze, moving the flag on the front porch. Nothing, not a single thing, hinted that just a few steps later, the life I'd spent 8 months building was about to fall apart. I walked around toward the back of the house. I was just about to call Daniel's name when I heard his voice. But it wasn't the voice I knew. The warmth was gone. It was calm, cold, the voice of someone giving a progress report. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything. Once the marriage license is signed, everything will go exactly as planned. My hand stopped, still resting on the doorknob. Instinct took over. I stepped back, pulled out my phone. The screen lit up in my hand. I hit record. Without the slightest hesitation, because in that exact moment, the woman who was about to become a bride disappeared. The only person left was an investigator. If you were standing where I was, would you walk in and confront him, or stay silent and hear the whole truth? Tell me what you would have done, down in the comments. I chose to stay quiet, and just a few seconds later, the man I thought I was going to marry started explaining exactly how he planned to take everything from me. I stayed perfectly still behind the wall, not because I was afraid, but because years of investigative work had taught me one thing: never interrupt someone who's busy exposing themselves. Daniel kept talking. His voice never changed. Steady, relaxed, almost casual. Once we're married, Gilles sign everything. After that, the rest is easy. Every sentence was delivered with chilling confidence. This wasn't the voice of a man in love. It was the voice of someone discussing an investment strategy. Then he said 2 words: power of attorney. My grip tightened around my phone. In my line of work, a document is never dangerous by itself. What's dangerous is the person holding it. Daniel laughed softly. She owns a lot more than she realizes. And the best part, she has no idea how to protect any of it. It wasn't a loud laugh. It didn't have to be. It was enough for me to realize the man I thought I was marrying had probably never existed at all. I started the recording. The phone screen went dark. Only a tiny red dot kept blinking quietly inside my jacket pocket. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. The Army teaches you something very early. Emotions can wait. Evidence can't. When the call finally ended, I quietly walked back to my car, closed the door, rested both hands on the steering wheel. For a long time, I just sat there. The engine never started. For the first time in my career, thought the person I needed to investigate was the man I loved. That morning, I went through my day as if nothing had happened. Meetings, paperwork, emails. No one on base had the slightest idea. My entire life had just changed. At lunch, I locked my office door, put on my headphones, and played the recording. The first time, I listened as a woman. The second time, I listened as an investigator. By the third, Daniel Carter was no longer my fiancé. He was the subject of an active investigation. That afternoon, I called Marcus, an old friend, who used to work financial investigations with me. I asked him to look into nothing more than public records, employment history, professional licenses, court filings. Marcus never asked why. He simply said, "Give me 2 days." Exactly 48 hours later, my phone rang. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. "Heather, I found something, and you're not going to like it." Daniel had been engaged twice before. That alone didn't surprise me. Then Marcus kept talking. Both women transferred most of their assets. Shortly before those relationships ended, the kitchen suddenly felt unnaturally quiet. I stared at the coffee sitting on the counter. It had gone cold, without me even noticing. In investigations, 1 case can be an accident, 2 might still be coincidence, but by the 3rd, it's no longer coincidence, it's a pattern, and this time, I was the next name on the list. I thought I'd finally uncovered Daniel's entire plan, until Marcus sent me one name, a name Daniel had never mentioned, not once, and that single name changed the direction of the entire investigation. 2 days later, Marcus called back. I was standing in my kitchen. The kettle had just started whistling. I heard it, but I never reached for it. "Heather, I found a few things. Daniel had been engaged twice before." I didn't react. 2 broken engagements don't make someone a criminal. Marcus kept going. Both women moved most of their assets into joint accounts, just a few months before the relationships ended. The kettle kept screaming. I quietly turned off the burner. In investigations, 1 case can be random, 2 might still be coincidence, but when the same pattern shows up a 3rd time, it stops being coincidence, it becomes a system. From that day on, I stopped watching Daniel like the man I was about to marry. I watched him like the subject of an investigation, not the big moments, the little ones. Those are the ones people never think to hide. He started bringing up money more often. "Maybe we should combine our accounts after the wedding. I can handle the investments. It'll make everything easier." A month earlier, I would have smiled and said yes. Now, I simply remembered every word, because every plan leaves fingerprints. A few days later, Daniel came home carrying a folder. He set it on the table and slid it toward me. Just a few final documents. I went through them one by one. Property ownership amendments, updated insurance beneficiaries, and finally, a full power of attorney. I looked up, smiled. "I'd like my attorney to review these first." It sounded like the most ordinary sentence in the world, but it was enough. For less than a second, Daniel froze. The smile disappeared from his face. Then, just as quickly, it came back. "Of course. I want everything to be completely transparent." That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't the only one studying him. Daniel, that was studying me too. This was no longer an investigation, it was a chess match, and both of us had already started playing. That afternoon, I met with Patricia. She read every page, without saying a word. Then she stacked the documents together, picked up her pen, and drew lines between them. By themselves, every one of these documents is legal, but together, they tell a very different story. She looked straight at me. "Heather, he's not trying to build a life with you. He's trying to gain control of yours." As I was about to leave, one small detail came back to me. Daniel's mother was the one who introduced us to the financial advisor. Patricia stopped writing. "What's his name?" A week later, my phone buzzed. "Heather, that financial advisor doesn't have a valid license." I slowly closed my eyes. The picture was finally starting to come into focus, but that wasn't why Patricia called me again. Later that same night, it wasn't the fake financial advisor. It was one name that had appeared in both of Daniel's previous engagements. The same name, every single time, his mother. I sat there for a long time after my call with Patricia. Finally, I asked her one question. "If I call off the wedding today, does this end?" Patricia slowly shook her head. "No. Daniel disappears, and sooner or later, he'll find someone else." The room fell silent. For the first time, I understood. This wasn't just about me anymore. I took 4 days of leave. I told Daniel my mother needed surgery. He wrapped his arms around me, kissed my forehead. "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything here." If I hadn't known the truth, I probably would have believed him. Instead, I found myself wondering how many women had heard those exact same words. I never went to Ohio. For 4 straight days, I worked with Patricia and Ray Delgado, a former investigator who specialized in financial crimes. The first thing Ray said to me stuck with me. "Don't waste your time proving Daniel is a bad man. Let the evidence tell you exactly who he is." I nodded. It was the same principle I'd followed for 12 years in the army. 2 days later, Ray laid a few photographs on the table. Daniel was sitting in a coffee shop. Across from him was a woman. There was nothing romantic about it. No touching. No smiles, just laptops, folders, and paperwork spread across the table. Ray looked at me. I kept watching. It wasn't until the third meeting that he finally captured audio. The woman asked, "Once the property is transferred, how long before we sell the house?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "As soon as possible." I just stared at the transcript. That house represented years of sacrifice, years of saving. To Daniel, it was nothing more than an asset to liquidate. But even that wasn't the biggest discovery. Ray opened another file, then slid it across the table. Right in the center was one number. $800,000. Daniel's debt, failed investments, creditors, overdue loans, every piece, finally locked into place. This had never been a marriage. It was a financial rescue plan, disguised as a proposal. That night, I stood in front of a whiteboard. Photographs, names, strings connecting everything. Daniel, Jessica, the fake financial advisor, his two former fiancés, the debt. There were no missing pieces anymore. I took a slow breath. The investigation was over. Now, the operation could begin. The very next morning, Daniel placed one final stack of documents in front of me. Then he smiled. "All that's left is your signature." He had no idea that somewhere along the way, the trap he'd built for me had become his. The next morning, Daniel set the folder down on the table, then slid a pen toward me. "Just a few final documents. Once these are signed, everything gets a whole lot easier." I looked at the pen, then at Daniel. 3 weeks earlier, I would have signed without a second thought. Today, I knew exactly what every signature was really meant to do. I picked up the pen, turned each page, signed. No hesitation, no questions. Daniel leaned back in his chair. A faint smile crept across his face. He thought he'd just won. What he didn't know was that a week earlier, Patricia had already finished restructuring every layer of my asset protection. The keys Daniel believed he was collecting, no longer unlocked anything at all. I remember asking Patricia, "If I still sign, am I putting myself at risk?" She smiled. "The dangerous move. Letting him know you won't. But this is exactly what you want him to believe." One thing I've learned from investigations, people make their biggest mistakes right after they convince themselves they've already won. Daniel was no different. The final 2 weeks before the wedding, I acted as though nothing had changed. We sampled wedding cakes, picked out flowers, confirmed the guest list. At night, Daniel talked about our honeymoon, the renovations we'd make to the house, the future we'd build together. I smiled. I nodded. I played the happiest bride in the world. But every time Daniel looked away, I watched him. Victory has a way of making people careless. Daniel started talking more, questioning less. Sometimes, he'd casually mention the future, as if everything I owned already belonged to him. That confidence became the final confirmation that our operation was unfolding exactly as planned. 3 days before the wedding, Ray sent over his final report. No changes, no signs Daniel was preparing to disappear, no unexpected moves. I stared at those few lines for a long time, then closed my laptop. It was the shortest report I'd received the entire investigation, and somehow, at the most important. Because that silence meant only one thing. Daniel, one suspected nothing. That night, he opened a bottle of wine, raised his glass toward me. "Just a few more days. Then our new life begins." I lifted my glass too. The crystal touched with the softest clink. "That's right, just a few more days." Daniel smiled, and for the first time, since the morning I overheard that phone call, I wasn't afraid anymore. Every piece was exactly where it needed to be. Now, all that was left was the final move. If you were Heather, would you keep playing the part until the very end, or call off the wedding right now? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. As for me, I'd already made my decision. I was going to see it through, because tomorrow morning, the person walking into the trap wouldn't be me. The night before the wedding, I barely slept, not because I was nervous, but because everything I could possibly do had already been done. From this point on, the next move belonged to Daniel. The next morning, the church slowly filled with guests. A piano played softly in the background, white flowers lined the aisle, congratulations echoed from every corner. No one knew they weren't about to witness a wedding. My mother stepped into the bridal suite. She gently straightened my veil, took a step back, and smiled. "You look beautiful." I met my own eyes in the mirror, the white dress, the bouquet in my hands, the smile. I'd practiced for days, only my eyes no longer belonged to a bride. My phone vibrated. One message, from Patricia. "We're ready." I read it once, locked the screen, and slipped the phone back into my clutch. Inside that small bag, wasn't just the recording. It held every answer Daniel never saw coming. A few minutes later, my father walked in. He adjusted his tie, looked at me for a long moment. "You ready?" I nodded, not because I had nothing to say, but because, if I'd opened my mouth, I probably would have told him everything. The music shifted, the processional began. The sanctuary doors slowly opened, sunlight spilled across the aisle. Out of instinct, I took one deep breath. Then started walking. The sound of my heels echoed against the stone floor. Every step brought me closer to Daniel. He was waiting at the altar, tailored suit, perfect smile, not a trace of doubt on his face. As I reached him, he leaned in and whispered, "You look incredible." I smiled back, "Thank you," just 2 words, but they were the last kind words I would ever say to him. The officiant began the ceremony. Pages turned softly. The church was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. My right hand held the bouquet, my left rested lightly against my clutch. The phone was still there, only inches from my fingertips. One touch. That was all it would take, to change every life in the room, forever. I looked at Daniel, one last time. He was still smiling, completely unaware that what was waiting for him. I wasn't a wedding vow, it was the truth. The officiant took a breath. "Before we begin exchanging your vows," I slowly opened my clutch. My finger settled over the play button. Just a few more seconds, and Daniel was about to become the star witness, against himself. I stood across from Daniel, just seconds away from being asked to say our vows. Daniel smiled, gently squeezed my hand. "I love you." I looked into his eyes, then quietly slipped my hand away. "I'm sorry." Those were the last words I ever spoke to him, as his fiancé. I opened my clutch, pulled out my phone. A ripple of confusion spread through the church. Daniel frowned. "Heather, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. My finger touched the screen, a soft click. Then, Daniel's voice filled the sanctuary. "Once the marriage license is signed, everything will go exactly as planned." The room went completely still. No one moved, no one breathed. Only Daniel's recorded voice echoed through the silence. "She owns a lot more than she realizes, and she has no idea how to protect any of it." I never looked down at the phone. I looked at Daniel. The smile vanished from his face. His eyes widened. His breathing turned uneven. For the first time since I'd met him, he couldn't control what his face was revealing. The recording ended. No one spoke. Somewhere in the church, a wine glass touched a table. Someone near the back let out a shaky breath. That silence said more than any accusation ever could. "Heather, you've got this all wrong." Daniel stepped toward me. "Please, let me explain." I slowly shook my head. "No, you already did, 3 weeks ago, right then." Patricia rose from the front pew, calmly. She walked toward the altar. In her hands was a blue case file. No raised voice, no dramatic speech. She simply placed each document on the table. An $800,000 debt, records from Daniel's previous engagements, asset transfer documents, proof that the so-called financial advisor was never licensed. One file after another. Each one closed another door on the lies Daniel had spent years building. Daniel looked around the church, as if he expected someone, anyone, to stand beside him. No one did. One guest quietly stood, then another, then another. There were no angry shouts, no arguments. People simply walked away. Sometimes, disappointment is louder than outrage. In the front row, Daniel's mother slowly rose to her feet. She looked at her son. For a long moment, her lips trembled. But she never spoke. She picked up her purse, walked past him, and left the church, without looking back. That was the moment Daniel finally understood. It was over. I took one long, steady breath. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I slipped off my engagement ring, and gently placed it on top of the Bible. I didn't throw it. I wasn't angry. I simply set it down, like closing. A chapter that had reached its rightful ending. My father walked over. He didn't ask a single question. He simply offered me his arm. I took it. Together, we walked out of the church. Behind us, there was no music. No applause, no wedding blessings, only the sound of footsteps, walking away from a lie. I thought everything had ended when those church doors closed behind me. But a few weeks later, 2 women I'd never met asked to see me, and that meeting made me realize I had never been the only victim. The church doors closed behind me. I stopped for a moment, took one long, steady breath. In the past 3 weeks, it was the first time I'd truly felt free. A few weeks later, Patricia arranged a meeting with the 2 women who had once been engaged to Daniel. We met in a small coffee shop. No case files. No lawyers. No one even mentioned money. Just 3 cups of coffee. Then that had gone cold long before anyone touched them. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then one of them gave a quiet laugh. I honestly thought I was the only one. The other woman simply nodded, and in that moment, I realized something. Daniel had never stolen only money. What he really took from people was their ability to trust again. This time, the evidence was impossible to ignore. Both women decided they weren't going to stay silent anymore. The legal process moved forward, exactly as it should. I didn't follow what happened after that. It wasn't my battle anymore. My part had ended the moment I walked out of that church. A few days later, I returned to base. My desk was exactly where I'd left it. A new stack of case files was already waiting. One of my coworkers walked by and gave my shoulder a light pat. "Welcome back," I smiled. "It's good to be back." On the surface, everything looked the same, but I knew something inside me had changed forever. Every now and then, I still open the top drawer of my desk. Inside is my military ID, the same card that made me turn the car around that morning. I pick it up, smile, then place it back, exactly where it belongs, not because it's lucky, but because, every time I see it, I'm reminded of one lesson. In the army, we're taught something very early: never act because of what you believe, act because of what you can prove. If I'd stormed into that room the moment I heard Daniel's phone call, he would have denied everything, destroyed the evidence, disappeared, and eventually, another woman would have become his next victim. What saved me wasn't the recording, it wasn't Patricia, it wasn't Ray, it was one decision. I let the evidence get there before my emotions did. Even now, I still believe in love, but I also believe real love never asks you to surrender control of your own life. Someone who truly loves you helps you protect your future. They don't quietly build a plan to take it away. Every investigation begins with a question, and ideally, it ends with an answer. The biggest investigation of my life was no different. It began with one forgotten military ID, and it ended with the truth, giving me back the life that was always mine. Before you go, what would you have done? Confront Daniel the moment you overheard the call. Stay quiet and gather evidence, like Heather did. Call off the wedding immediately and walk away. Let me know your choice in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoy stories about courage, justice, and the decisions that can change an entire life, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.